Previously, I broke down the story of Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy Origins Strangers of Paradise. If you haven't watched that video already, you can find a link to it in the description down below. Looking back at that video, we got to see Jack's transformation from an all-around good guy who just wanted to kill chaos, to literally becoming everything he hated to save the world. And we're still left with a lot of questions. While Jack does become Garland and ultimately Chaos, who does that leave us with as the big bad of Final Fantasy 1? Jack would have us believe that the evil people behind this all are actually a strange group called the Lufenians. Yes, these are the people that Jack works for, then rebels against, and are the real reason he turned himself into Chaos. But what do we really know about this group of people? And are they really the big bad of Final Fantasy Origins? Or is there someone or something larger at play behind the scenes? That's what we'll break down in this video, so get ready to smash some crystals, jump around in time, and mess around with the balance of light and dark as we explore all about the Lufenians. In Final Fantasy 1, we're told that the Lufenians were an advanced civilization once called the Sky People, and that they had learned to master the wind. With this mastery, they were able to create a floating castle high in the sky where they lived separate from the rest of the people of the world. They were so advanced that they were even able to create mechanical beings, and one Lufenian named Sid invented the airship that's later found and used in that game. Eventually, the Fiend of the Wind, Tiamat, appeared one day and overtook the Lufenians' floating castle, banishing them from the sky and back to the land, weakening them as a people. They built a settlement called Lufenia and passed on a legend that in 400 years after the fall of their civilization, 4 Lightbearers would save the world from darkness. This story was passed down through the generations until the Warriors of Light eventually would show up. At some point before the Warriors of Light arrived, the Lufenians actually sent out 5 warriors on a mission to see if there was a force controlling Tiamat. These warriors never returned, and it was said that they were cursed by the fiends and turned into bats. Yep, in Final Fantasy Origins, Astos was said to have cursed some Lufenian agents and turned them into bats. These are the ones that are always following him around. So that lines up pretty well with them researching who might have been controlling or behind Tiamat. So doing a quick recap, the Lufenians were a super advanced race of people that were able to make floating castles and airships. They had technology far superior to the people of their time. They were run out of their home by an agent of chaos, Tiamat, and forced to live among the regular people and slowly faded into obscurity and myth. They also somehow were able to see into the future and predict that the Warriors of Light would come and save the world from the darkness. If you ask me, this doesn't really add up to a group of Dr. Evil type villains hellbent on destroying the world. So what are we missing? Well, in Final Fantasy Origins, we learned that the Lufenian race was not completely extinguished like many thought. Instead, they found a way to pack up and travel to another dimension that they would make their new home and base of operations. While in this new dimension, they developed a way to see into the future and to track the amount of light and darkness in Cornelia. With this ability, they see that the balance of light and darkness are falling out of sync, and if left unchecked, in about 2,000 years' time, the energies would become so unstable that it would lead to Cornelia's total destruction. Knowing of the world's impending destruction, the Lufenians wanted to find a way to prevent it from happening. Even though they were so advanced, they had no way of making an impact on the scale that they would need to change the course of history. Luckily, this is when they would meet the one that they would only ever refer to as their extraplanar collaborator. Never giving a proper description of this collaborator, we can guess that this is a person or thing who originates from another dimension, or rather, maybe even another plane of existence altogether. Normally a term like this would be used for something akin to a god or a higher power. This meeting actually goes well, and the Lufenians are able to make a deal with the collaborator for their help. The collaborator listens to the Lufenians' concern about the world ending and agrees to provide them with technology needed to alter their planet's future. This comes in the form of a dimensional crystal matrix. This is so powerful that it allows them to travel backwards in time as well as reconstruct the world from any chosen point in the past. This is a process that they would actually name a reset. Now, having this ability, they would be able to carry out any experiments they wanted to on a global scale without fear of consequences. As we all know, nothing is ever given out for free, so the collaborator requested that in exchange for this crystal matrix, each time the Lufenians reset the world, a large amount of energy would be generated, and that they wanted all this energy to be transferred to them. Not seeing a need for that energy, the Lufenians happily agreed. With this deal in place, the Lufenians placed crystals throughout the world, allowing the Matrix to work and their resets to take place. These crystals had a side effect, however, of stabilizing the elements: the earth, the wind, the fire, and the water. When the humans eventually found these crystals, they realized that they had magical properties over the elements and began to worship their presence. This in turn increased the amount of light around them, which created a larger imbalance between the light and darkness. To counteract this effect, the Lufenians began to push darkness into the world, which would help balance out the light. This unfortunately also introduced the possibility that humans could become infected by darkness, causing large shifts in the spectrum and even allowing some of them to transform into monsters. This constant balancing act of light and darkness would lead them to start what they call the Stranger Project. The Stranger Project is meant to allow them to control the amount of light and darkness in the world at all times. They could try and control this balance by injecting the world with darkness, and then sending Lufenian agents to destroy the monsters this darkness creates whenever it becomes too powerful for the light. These agents, otherwise known as Strangers, are led by Jack, and that's what we witness happening throughout Stranger of Paradise. After many attempts of balancing the world's light and darkness, the Lufenians were not seeing the results they had expected. This is when the collaborator shares with them the knowledge that they keep failing because of the uncertain and unstable nature of human emotions. The light of order and the darkness of chaos all originate from emotions generated by the human heart. So, as long as humans continue to exist, the problem would never really be solved. Over the course of hundreds of more experiments, the Lufenians determined that human existence was also the source of something they called the chaos phenomena. This obviously posed more problems because their end goal was to create a perfect world where everything and everyone was in harmony. They had hoped to save and bring all organisms with them into this glorious planned future, but they decided that they may need to remove life forms that are unmanageable. Humans. The collaborator proposed a new plan to the Lufenians. Allow the Strangers to deal with all the fiends that had refused to be controlled by the Lufenians, and after they were done, increase darkness levels until the negative energy reached its maximum threshold. This would cause all of humanity to transform into monsters, allowing them to kill each other. As well, it would lower the difficulty of reducing overall darkness and simplify the human problem. If all humans were to become monsters, then the question of whether to exterminate them or not is solved. This would be the biggest experiment that they had ever attempted, and it would generate far more energy than any reset had before. The collaborator requested that the energy generated from this process be transferred to them like all other previous times. Astos learned of this plan during one of his status reports with the Lufenians, and that's when he and Jack began to hatch their scheme to turn Jack into chaos in hopes that Jack could stop the Lufenians from messing with their world permanently. As Jack was consumed by darkness and hatred, he was able to hop dimensions and scare the Lufenians of Station 19 into cutting all ties with Cornelia and the timeline that they had been testing. This meant that all projects relating to that timeline, as well as the Lufenians who were left behind in that timeline, were abandoned and stuck there. That's where our information ends. What happens to the Lufenians after they severed connections with Station 19 and Jack's timeline is never explained, but we can assume they're still in their own dimension, working with the collaborator, hatching up some other scheme. After reflecting on everything we know about the Lufenians and their goals of trying to save the world, are they really the bad people that Jack makes them out to be? Yes, they are toying with everyone's lives and trying to play God, but they are trying to save the world and create unity and harmony, albeit in a misguided way. Are they really the ones to be blamed? Or are they too being manipulated, but by the collaborator for some other nefarious means? This leaves us with some other questions. Who is the collaborator? What do they need with all that energy? What happened to the Lufenians who were left behind in Jack's timeline? These are other great questions that I have some theories on, so subscribe to the channel so you won't miss my next video breaking down who or what I think the collaborator is, and whether or not this may actually be hinting at a future Final Fantasy game. Thanks so much for watching. Please like the video and share with anyone who may enjoy this, as it really helps me out. Until next time, happy gaming.